Okay, well, we have a number of people on the call, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. And welcome to Extranet User Manager's webinar on making Microsoft simple. Looking forward to the team and I are looking forward to talking to you about how you can improve your ROI and improve your cybersecurity. For quick introductions, my name's Julian Mills. I'm Vice President of Product and Marketing with Extranet User Manager. I have a background in digital strategy and business process, and for today's topic, I have to say I'm especially excited by the benefits we're seeing around business process improvement using Microsoft 365. So that's an area that I'll be talking about a bit. And then I'm going to be joined by my colleagues on the leadership team at Extranet User Manager who are going to be providing their perspective on how we make Microsoft simple. Just as a quick kickoff, this is a Teams meeting. I know we've already seen people using the clap emoji, so we have some Teams veterans on the call today. Chat will be open throughout the webinar. We really do want to hear questions and comments today, and we would ask that you start by asking those through chat. We'll be monitoring that. We would also ask that you stay on mute. If you'd like to join the conversation, which again we very much welcome, please ask on chat or raise a virtual hand and wait for an invitation to join the conversation. But overall, once again, welcome. We know you're really going to enjoy the information we're sharing, and we're looking forward to hearing everything that you're going to learn. And I'll hand things over to Dinesh to do his introductions.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining again today. My name is Dinesh Sohan, and I'm the VP of Engineering here at Extranet User Manager, expert in SharePoint, .NET technologies, and I have over 12 years of experience leading development teams. I'll pass it on to them.
Hello, I'm Logan Guest. I'm our VP of Sales and Customer Success. So I've had the opportunity to work at Extranet User Manager for over 7 years now. Lots of experience working with different companies around Microsoft 365 in general, especially any sort of external facing portals. So excited to be here today. I'll pass it over to Peter.
Thanks, Logan. Peter Carson here, President, Chief Bottle Washer at Vision IT and Extranet User Manager. Also 12-time Office Apps and Services, Microsoft MVP. So do a lot of speaking at conferences and such. Actually excited to be heading down to Melbourne in a couple of weeks to speak at Debbie Ireland's Digital Workplace Conference. Contact details are here, so feel free to reach out. We're going to be sharing the deck and the recording afterwards, so you'll have all of our details. Julian, I'll pass it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Peter. So the 5 key things we're going to be talking about today is some of the challenges that Microsoft has and some of the underlying complexity of Microsoft 365. And an area we're going to be drilling into is the dilemma around permissions management. So that's an area where we've seen organizations really unlock a lot of value from it. And Logan alluded to this already. We're also seeing huge benefits in the market if you're able to extend content and data that you're managing in Microsoft 365 to external users. And a big part of the presentation today is really kind of lifting the hood on how Extranet User Manager brings simplicity to Microsoft 365. So that's where Dinesh in particular will be focusing. And then Logan's going to close out with some examples of real customers who are getting some strong benefits by making Microsoft simple. Before I jump in, because we do have some information that we share about Microsoft 365, I'm going to just start by putting it on record. We love Microsoft. Everyone of us here has worked with it for decades. In my case, I've had the chance to work with it going back to SharePoint 2007 when it came out, and I was with an organization that was helping build intranets and portals. And then I've been client side as well and really seen it transform organizations. So we absolutely love it. We also, what we like to say is just like with a person who has enormous strengths, which is their light, sometimes that light can cast a shadow. So sometimes those strengths come with some weaknesses that can be addressed as well. But what I want to stress is we love Microsoft, we love its light, and we're very much aware of how organizations can get full value from the technology. That sets us up for just the unequivocal power of Microsoft 365. The statistics behind it are just amazing. It's got over 300 million active users worldwide. And a lot of that is based on the productivity applications that it solves. I mean, that's why Peter's been a 12-time MVP. Organizations are seeing huge unlocks in productivity with the Microsoft technology, and it's resulting in some very substantial bottom line benefits. So Forrester's reported that organizations that use it see a 466% return on investment over a 3-year period. And one area that I'll ask you to track as we go through this is one of that areas of ROI is taking applications out of the organization. Those applications can be expensive from a licensing cost, but there's also just a cost of complexity of managing them. So that's an area that we'll be dwelling on a bit. And then a little bit on the shadow. There's no way that it can solve all those problems and be simple. So complexity is it's a feature, not a bug, if I can put it that way. And as a result, 50% of users are unaware of the features that are available to them through their Microsoft 365 license. And also 43% of IT professionals struggle to configure Microsoft 365 due to its complexity. And what I want to emphasize is that's to be expected. Just because of how much you get from a single license. So if we start to lift the hood a little bit on where does that underlying complexity come from, I've alluded to this already, but there's so many features that come from it within it. It can be a little challenging to understand just what do you have and how best do you utilize them. The other issue is, and Microsoft themselves admit to this, like they're not always easy out of the box. And so sometimes the applications and features require training or adoption efforts to help get full value from it. The other point, and this is an area that I've been really interested in, especially when I've been client side, is a lot of organizations develop specific processes. A lot of those processes are between IT and the business around things like how do you set up permissions, how do you manage security, etc. And Microsoft is technology that spans all industries, all geographies. So you really have to understand how Microsoft works and then have a bit of an understanding of how to configure it to fit within your processes as well. So that can add to some complexity as well, and also can really hit up IT to make sure that they've got the right experience to do that. The other thing is it does not natively support large-scale external collaboration. And what we're seeing is quite strong interest in that because especially for users, if it goes back to that 466% return on investment, a lot of users are getting a lot of value from basic productivity apps like Excel, Word, etc. And it's good for them if they can continue to use that technology to share that data with their external audience. But this is where the permissions management comes in. If that's challenging internally, it can be even more challenging externally. And the other thing that everybody who's worked with Microsoft for any period of time has learned the G word, which is governance. So it can sprawl on you in a hurry. And so if you're not really focusing on governance, that can become part of the complexity that you have to address. So we've sort of talked a little bit about what happens, why it is complex. The other question is what happens when it is complex. So one of the points I've touched on already is it can start to reduce your ROI. So you're maybe not getting full utilization of those licenses if you're only using 50% of what's there. It can also result in just some inefficiencies that can be a productivity drag as well. Another area that's been getting a lot of attention lately is the encouragement of shadow IT. And this is often where this dynamic between IT and the business can come in, is if the business perceives something as being very complex, especially an area where everybody's being told to be agile and get to results quickly, they can get frustrated and think, hey, I can go buy a point solution that I can implement very quickly. Without necessarily understanding the full total cost of ownership that goes with that and the burden that it's putting on IT. And the final thing is just if it's cumbersome to set up, you may start to see users resorting to insecure workarounds such as sharing documents externally via email. And that kind of gets into the third one, and we're finding our clients this is the one they're getting most interested in, is the undermining of security. Just some quick stats that we've come across. In the first half of 2023 alone, there's been 4.5 billion records that have been compromised through cybersecurity, which comes with a cost of $6 trillion, which works out to about $18,000 per person in the United States. So it's a considerable cost. And again, that's why we're targeting this permissions piece, because Microsoft and Azure is some of the most secure technology available. If it's configured right and it's easy and intuitive for users to use, it's extremely secure. But if it's complicated, they can get frustrated and not intentionally create security concerns, but may inadvertently create that. So that sort of brings us to this concept of making Microsoft simple. So I said early on that we embrace Microsoft 365 Lite, which is the considerable security and the full set of functionality you get and the chance to deliver significant ROI to your organization. But we also feel that by addressing its shadow, we can unlock the full value of Microsoft 365. And we do that by making Microsoft simple. So on that note, I'm going to turn things over to Peter, and Peter's going to really get into some nice detail about how we go about making Microsoft simple.
Thanks, Julian. Yeah, so first, caveat, we don't make all of Microsoft simple. It's a huge beast. We're very focused on a very specific use case, which is, as Julian alluded to, how do we make it simple for organizations to connect to their external stakeholders? And first and foremost, that has to be a great user experience. And Microsoft's invested a ton in UI, and they've come leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. They initiated what they called their modern SharePoint probably about 5-6 years ago now, and it has simplified things and made things easier from that point of view, but it's still complex. There's still, because it's built to address every possible scenario, it's not a point solution, and it does become overwhelming for people. But what we want to ensure is that, as Julian mentioned, we want to make it simple for the business to get their work done, but IT still needs to be involved. IT needs to understand that things are set up properly, that the governance is there, that security is there. So they can do that at the beginning to configure that, and then just let the business go, being comfortable knowing that the business isn't going to make a mess of things from that point of view, that they'll be able to get their job done, but things will still be done securely and properly from that point of view. So that's really the key point here. Sorry, let me just jump ahead. So as we've talked about, permissions management is a challenge, and a lot of business folks don't really know or care about this. There's just, hey, I want to get what I'm doing to the right people so they can work with, and however they happen to do that, whether that's within the structures that IT have set up, or they go out into shadow IT, or they do email attachments, or any number of other ways of doing that. That's their goal, and they don't maybe think as much about how do I do this properly and securely, nor should they. When we talk about that big G word, the governance side of things, I love a quote from Dux, who's another MVP speaker, which is good governance is making it easy for people to do the right thing. And that's the key, the simple and the easy, is that if you make the simplest path the right path, the secure path, then that's awesome. Business people will just naturally follow that because it's the easiest thing for them to do. If you make it hard, they're going to say, hey, this is too hard, and I'm going to take a different path, which is maybe not the ideal path from that point of view. So permissions is a key one around this, that it can very quickly spin out of control. And we see this in a lot of organizations. In fact, there's a lot of third-party vendors out there that have products specifically about unwinding the mess of permissions in Microsoft 365. Because if you let everybody in your organization manage permissions and decide what they want to do with them, people don't fully understand how to do that, and things just get completely out of control, and stuff that maybe should be secured to certain audiences is available to others, and that's where you have information leakage and security issues from that point of view. The alternative is IT becomes the gatekeeper, and they say, hey, we're going to manage all permissions, and the business needs to open a service ticket with us to do anything. That frustrates the business because IT's busy and their ticket queue is long, and I can't wait weeks for this thing that I need to do today to unlock. I'm just going to go around IT and do my own thing if they're a gatekeeper from that point of view. So we understand that managing of permissions is complex, and particularly when we get into the external stakeholders and sharing with people outside of your organization, what does that mean? And you can't kind of set it once and forget it, because the business needs are going to change. It needs to be flexible and allow that flexibility. So I'd like to talk about this idea of decoupling permissions management and membership management. That yes, you can leave permissions management with IT to properly set up and configure. And part of that should be doing what's called role-based access control, saying we're going to create groups with certain permissions in it, and then we're going to give ownership of those groups to the business, and all they need to decide is who needs to be in that group to be able to do that thing. So we want to make that as simple as possible, that you're really empowering the business users not to worry about, how do I set the permissions up right to do this properly? Just, I've got a template that I follow. The permissions are all pre-baked for me. IT is comfortable that that template was properly built. And I just start inviting people in. Whether we're talking about internal within the organization or external, the same rules apply. Doing individual permissions to say this person and that person and that person should be able to do this quickly spins out of control and becomes unmanageable. But this idea of delegation, that IT can securely delegate and feel comfortable with that delegation of the business, that they're able to do what they need to do without breaking the security and making a mess of things. So that really, improves the turnaround time, that they're not waiting for IT to do things. If a process is set up, and we're going to show you some of those processes, they don't need to wait for IT to intervene in there, but IT can feel comfortable that the business is doing the right thing. So it becomes very flexible, but it also ensures secure collaboration where we've got that control over permissions, we've got that cybersecurity in place from that point of view. We're leveraging the Microsoft 365 stack as part of that. Which really comes into the next point of, why would you want to extend your Microsoft 365 externally? I mean, first, sure, there's a cost management side to it, and that can become significant. If you've got all sorts of shadow IT in your organization, you've got Box and Dropbox and all these other Citrix Secure Share tools out there for doing this kind of sharing, you've already paid for a Microsoft 365 license. It has tremendous power and tremendous security, and you're not leveraging it if you're doubling up and buying these other shadow IT tools as part of that. So you can eliminate those tools. There's a clear financial side to that. But I think the bigger ones are the next two. The next one being the adoption for business users. If they have to understand multiple different tools, that's more complexity for them, and it's just harder for them to get their job done. If they're already using Microsoft 365 internally in what they're doing, and they can do that in an easy way with external people, then it's the same interface, it's the same tools. There's a familiarity and a productivity benefit from there. Probably the biggest one, it's hardest to measure because if you do it right, you never have to pay for it, which is, has there been a ransomware attack, some sort of intrusion, a compromise, a data leakage, all the horrible things you read about in the news. You never want your organization to be that one in the news. So how do you ensure that security is being done properly? A big part of security and hardening of an organization is minimizing what's called the attack surface. The more things that you have exposed externally, the more tools that you're using, the more things that you have to secure appropriately, and the more opportunity for nefarious actors to come in and compromise that. So if you standardize and say, hey, we're going to use Microsoft 365 for this, we know that Microsoft invests north of $1 billion a year just around cybersecurity. Not only they're building stuff into their product, but they have, blue and red teams that are doing attack scenarios. They're watching what's happening out in the broader world. They're being proactive and getting ahead of that. So having, a huge partner like that in your back pocket to say, hey, they're watching. We're not just leveraging their product, but we're leveraging their massive team to help us with our cybersecurity. Super important. So all three of those things are important. The last one is what's going to keep your chief information security officer awake at night. It may not keep your business person awake at night, but I would argue that the C-suite in general is talking a lot about cybersecurity. It's a growing threat, and it's something that the entire business needs to be aware of. So if we can make it easy and simple, and still secure, that's an awesome goal from that point of view, and that is our goal. So what are our principles around making Microsoft simple in this specific scenario around external collaboration? And first and foremost is user-centric design. To say, hey, we need to think like the business, and we need to think like their external users, and how do we make this as simple as possible? Taking something complex and making it simple is not a simple task itself. It's actually a really hard task, but we put a lot of thought into those user journeys and those flows to say, hey, how do we minimize the number of steps, the numbers of clicks, even the sign-in process into our portal, which you'll see in a minute. People often don't remember when they've been invited to another organization's portal. Hey, have I registered? Do I already have an account, or do I need to sign up? I don't know, and they get lost down these different paths. We said, hey, let's just have a single flow that says, hey, just give us your email address. We'll figure out if you have an account already or not, if you're allowed to self-register or not, and take you down the right path and avoid that confusion. The next part is around automation and integration to say, hey, what are things that we can streamline and automate? We recently signed a deal with State of Illinois. So they're going to be bringing several 100,000 users externally into their Microsoft 365 tenant access training. You can't onboard hundreds of thousands of people manually. Like, you need automation around that. So we've got rules that say, hey, this group is available to these people, it's available to anybody, or you have to belong to this email domain as somebody registering. So anything we can do to simplify that process and build that scale is a key part of what we're doing there. And it's not just Microsoft 365. I mean, these processes may be integrated into your SAP, your Salesforce, your Dynamic CRM. So how do we build those hooks to keep all that information together and eliminate those data silos? And the last piece is avoiding a one-size-fits-all. So Microsoft inherently has to be a one-size-fits-all. They've got 300 million users, and they're not going to build a different UI for each of those 300 million people. It's just not scalable. But what we do is we work with you to say, hey, what's your use cases? What are the things that you're doing as an organization? Let's get your brand in there. Let's get your domain in there, your certificates, and tailor that user journey to exactly what you're doing, which eliminates that complexity and makes it easier both for your business and for the people that they're collaborating with as part of that. So that's really the key principles around that. So coming back to the making Microsoft simple. So we're using Teams right here for the meeting. Pretty much everybody on the call, if your organization uses Microsoft 365, because of the pandemic and post, I mean, we're all used to using Teams for meetings, for chats, for communicating and such from that point of view. But Teams itself is quite complex, and even deploying and managing teams in your organization can be a complex thing. We actually have an open source solution around provisioning of teams and templating that and simplifying that process. We're actually showing how we can leverage it in point use case scenarios as part of our solution here. So if we think about if we're bringing people in to our Microsoft 365, where do we want them to work? And there's kind of three different scenarios that we see. One is that we'd like the people to live in our Extranet User Manager portal, which has a branded, simplified user experience. It's very specific. So if you're a board member or a committee member, or you're part of a project, you have a portal that's built specifically for that scenario and shows you exactly what you need to do. Maybe it's a little more ad hoc and you want to leverage full SharePoint Online. Well, use our tool to onboard those people, bring them in securely, and then guide them into the right spot in your SharePoint Online that they can work with you, say in team sites, and collaborate on files. Or maybe you want to bring them right into Teams. I mean, we've started using shared channels in Teams with our partners so we can communicate with them, even some of our clients as well. So if the other organization is deeply embedded in Teams, that can work really well. But it's tough to set up because it's not something you do person to person. You actually have to do it organization to organization, and the two organizations' IT teams need to trust each other and set up that connection between them. So it depends your level of integration between the different organizations. But if we come back to Extranet User Manager, we've got a number of different parts and components to our full suite. We've got the User Manager for onboarding. We're going to be showing you our documents interface for requesting and publishing securely documents, the publisher for web content, and across all of those, it's about having that simplicity to say, hey, how do we shield not just the external users, but the business users themselves from Microsoft 365 complexity? And how do we take the friction out of that permission management? How do we allow IT to be comfortable that the templates and the steps and the automation is in place? The business isn't going to break things, but the business still has the flexibility to decide who they're going to be collaborating with from that point of view. We're deeply embedded into Microsoft as a technology. We blew our product up 2 years ago and basically rebuilt it and said, hey, our legacy is SharePoint and on-premises back in the pre-cloud days, but everything's cloud today. So it's built natively right on top of Azure Active Directory and also Microsoft 365. So everything that you're doing is actually in your Azure AD. I mean, we host our product for our clients. We don't host our clients' data, though. It lives in their own Microsoft 365 tenant. So from a data privacy and security point of view, even though we run in Azure data centers in the US, in Canada, and Western Europe, depending on where our clients are, it's actually their tenant that's hosting all of that data. And we, even though we host it, we can still integrate into your systems. We'll talk about case studies where we're integrating into Dynamics CRM, Salesforce, SAP as part of that. And the net coming out of this, cybersecurity and compliance are at the high level that Microsoft is running at without the complexity in those specific use cases that we're dealing with. So I'm going to turn it over in a minute to Dinesh to kind of take you through a demo from that point of view. But I actually want to start with a little bit of a demo on my side on how we're using it internally on our own side. So I'm here in the browser, logged in with my production credential. I'm on our Microsoft 365, and I'll come over to another tab here. This is our customer partner portal. We use this to expose out to our clients, to our partners that we want to work with, and to be able to exchange and trade things back and forth. So I can log in with my credentials here. I'm already logged into my browser, so it's going over to Microsoft to do the login, single sign-on. I don't have to log into the portal. And the goal is if your external stakeholders use Microsoft 365 themselves, they would see a very similar user experience here. They would use their own organizational credentials, so you're not tracking passwords for your external stakeholders. All that's dealt with on their side, and it's all secure from that point of view. Now, because I'm internal, I belong to a ton of different groups here, so I can see a bunch of our clients, partners, and we're going through a growth phase at Extranet User Manager. So we're looking for funding to fund our next level of growth. So we're talking to BDC, to our commercial bank, RBC, to Easily, to a bunch of different financial institutions. And we actually use our portal to help facilitate that process. If I come down through here, we've got a BDC portal for exchange with them. We've got a Desjardins one, an Easily one. Let's actually use the Easily example. This is actually real live, so I'm not going to click into documents because these are our real financial statements and things like that. But it becomes an easy way to exchange those documents back and forth. And we can say, hey, what are the documents that are required? What have been provided? Is there any comments or notes or descriptions around that? So we can see, in Easily's case, they're looking for bank statements from all our different accounts, our notice of assessments from Canada Revenue Agency, what's our ownership structure, our financial model, financial statements, tax returns. So there's a bunch of stuff. And we've actually done a few back and forth with Jerome from Easily as part of this to say, hey, here's our first tranche of documents. Oh, we're missing a couple more. We need a few more additional. But this becomes a nice working place. Imagine this through email with all these emails going back and forth and attachments, nobody really knowing what's the full picture and what have we provided across as part of that. We actually have an Excel document that tracks the whole process that can be used to manage that. We haven't done it on this one, but for other clients, we've built Power BI dashboards. You could actually roll up and say, okay, across all these different projects that we've got going on, where do we stand? Like which still have outstanding documents, process, and such from that point of view. So it becomes really easy to leverage that power as part of that. So that's sort of a real world scenario. So Dinesh, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's kind of peel under the hood and have a look at all that, how that wires together.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today on the webinar. This is a re-recording of the webinar demo that occurred on July 6th. We did have a few technical glitches. So today, in this demo, I'm going to be wearing two hats. The first type of user is going to be the business user, could be an IT administrator, depend on the organization requirements of who you want to be able to create the data room team site, as well as provision the site for collaboration. So in this case, assume that a business user is going to create a team site to collect loan applications from an external user, so that that person is requesting a loan, and the financial institution wants to get some documents from that particular individual. So the first thing that they would do is they would go and request the team to be provisioned for those documents to be stored. So we do have multiple templates. In this case, we keep the templates very simple. All we need to do is have a title for the the team site, it automatically creates an alias, which you can change. I can change this if I want to. The purpose is just a description that describes what this team site is about. And then additionally, because sensitive information is going to be shared, financial documents and stuff like that, we probably want to apply a sensitivity labeling to those types of sites so that in case somebody downloads the information or tries to access the information, multi-factor authentication can be applied through conditional access policies within Azure Active Directory for these particular site collections. Right. So multi-factor authentication, basically when a guest user tries to access this site, they will either be taken down setting up the multi-factor authentication through using the Authenticator app or some other setting that you set up on your tenant. Likewise, you can enable the trust between the organizations. And if that trust is set up on your tenancy, when the user signs in, and if they're using Office 365 account and their account have multi-factor authentication enabled, that authentication is, I guess, adhered to in your tenant as well. Right. So really, basically, you fill out the form and you hit the save button. This takes about 5 to 6 minutes to provision the site. There's lots of things going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to wait for it. I'm actually just going to go over to one of the site collections that we previously provisioned for this. So the next step, as part of the business user, once the form has been approved or the site collection has been created, they need to go in and create a folder for those documents to live in, right? So a data room, think of it as a document library that has a bunch of folders in it that's uniquely shared across different people. So in this case, the business user comes in, clicks on, I want to create a folder. They can give their folder a name. So webinar demo 1. And then the permission level. How do I want people to interact with these documents within this folder? Do I just want to give them read access? Do I want to give them the ability to upload net new documents or modify existing documents in there, but potentially not have the ability to delete the files that they've uploaded? These permission levels are customizable as well, so you can create your own and populate the form with your options. In this case, I'm just going to click contribute with no delete and hit the save button. So again, what it's doing is on the data room side, it's going to just create a folder, set up the unique permissions and such like that. I'm going to jump over to one that's previously set up. So this is the Easily. Peter demonstrated a portion of this, what we're using on our live environment. So again, the theme was a financial bank or whatever is requesting documents from an external user for the loan applications. So in this case, they would want me to send in my bank statement, my notice of assessment, some financial models, some tax returns, and such, so that they can approve my loan. These documents are all required based on this document tracking thing here that we can modify. We can change any of these fields. We can make them required. We can add net new ones and such like that. But for this demo, I'm not going to modify any of these requirements. And once as we've set up the document tracking, we have the document room set up for it. The next step is for the business user to invite the external party to come in and collaborate with these documents. So I'm just going to go and invite myself to this document. So as you can tell, it's a security group that was created under the hood, right? We can see that this is the security group name. This is the location in the SharePoint site collection where it is. Right now, this particular group is set up as invitation only, but you have the option to change that to private or private, which will provide them with a link that users the business users can share with the external users to say, come to my site, use this link. It will force you down a registration path. And once you set up, you'll gain access to that portal. Likewise, we can have automation. So we can choose that anybody who registers with that link automatically gets in, or we can have something like the approvals are required, but anybody registering with certain email domains would automatically get into the particular group. And each group that we create has an email that can be sent to them upon being added as a member of that group. And this email can have information such as, where are the links that I go to access the data room, or any sort of information that you would want to send to the user from an onboarding process. Right. So that being said, I'm going to go over here now and add myself to this group. Click there and add a member. So now that pretty much wraps up, for the most part, the side of the business user, bringing in an external user into the data room portal. So I'm going to flip over to myself now. So I'm currently signed in on our corporate SharePoint, so Office 365, and I'm just going to navigate over to my mail because I saw a new mail come in, and in here I see that, hey, somebody invited me to this EUM Easily data room, and I can go to the data room. So clicking here allows me to go to the data room. Had I not been invited, and say, for instance, somebody sent me a link that I had to click on, that if I had just typed in an email that isn't known to the system, I get taken down the registration path, right? But in this scenario, I want to use my own account. And because the business user has already added me to the group, signing in, I'm already part of their Azure Active Directory. So it will detect that and then take me over to my Envision IT Azure Active Directory for signing in, and single sign me on into their portal. So once that loads, there I am in the Easily data room portal, where I can now submit my financial documents, such as my statements, my notice of assessments, and stuff like that. I could also see who the members of that group is. I could see Peter as a member, the staff member, and Dinesh. So the person I'm working with, the business user I'm working with, is the staff member 1. So in this case, I can use these quick buttons to upload my documents. I can choose my files. I have my demo documents. I'm just going to choose a few documents here. Oops. Open that. I can then quickly tag my document. So this is my bank statement. This is a notice of assessment. This is my financial model, right? My ownership, and my tax return. Right, and then I would hit the upload. Obviously, this will take a little bit of time, as there's multiple documents to upload. But once that occurs, what happens behind the scenes is that the refresh job runs and matches up those documents with the required documents within that Excel tracking. So we can see here, once this refreshes, we can see that these items have been properly tagged and matches up. And from the business user side, if I go back to that document tracking document, it hasn't quite refreshed yet, but I do have a refresh documents tracking here. And if I refresh my page, I can see, hey, look, I need to refresh that document Excel to populate these files that was uploaded by Dinesh. And if I go in here, I can now see that, hey, look at that. He submitted his bank statement, his notice of assessment, his financial models. I'm still missing his financial statement though, but I did get his tax return and stuff like that. Right. Just say I did make a mistake in tagging these documents. I do have the ability to edit my metadata and say this one's supposed to be financial model, and this one's supposed to be my bank statement, for instance, I can update that as well from that perspective. Right, and that basically concludes my demo. So thank you very much. I'll pass it over to Logan now.
Thanks so much. Okay, so I was going to carry on from Dinesh's demo. We wanted to actually talk about some client cases that had some parallels over to the kind of data portal story, having a simple spot to upload documents for kind of a structured document sharing process. And then I've got some other customer samples that are just more focused on the simplifying Microsoft 365 side. So the first client here is called Mold Masters. They are an injection molding organization. They provide services and products out to various industries. And for them, they're all in on Microsoft 365, but they needed a centralized client-facing portal that would simplify document sharing. So, a major part of an injection mold is the actual mold design itself, and having a process around how do you make it really easy for our designers and engineers to build a mold design, share that back with the customer, allow the customer to provide feedback, reach a mutual state of agreement. We're ready to go with this mold, approve on both sides. Leveraging like SharePoint Online and Microsoft 365 out of the box, there isn't a lot of good tooling to support that fairly formal process, especially when Mold Masters bids on a project, they would have a defined number of revisions. It can't go on forever. There's some back and forth with the client there. So we basically built a portal leveraging our EUM portal and documents products that Dinesh was showing, sample versions of the data portal vision. And ultimately, those engineering drawings, they live in SharePoint Online. So you have all the really strong document management features of SharePoint Online under the hood, but we're only surfacing up in the portal what we actually need for both the engineers internally at Mold Masters as well as the customers. And the big thing is we automated that drawing package preparation. So similar to how Dinesh just created a new folder for a data room, we have a very similar process that says, okay, I've got a new client, a new client that I need to go back and forth on a mold design for. Have a simple process that's consistent from a permissions perspective to go and provision that. And then all of the magic happens in the workflows that we've built, where you've got basically a single spot for engineering to go to. Once that mold is ready to be reviewed by the client, they upload it, they tag it properly, and then that triggers a customer notification to say, hey, there's a drawing waiting for your approval. They do have the opportunity, if there's revisions, feedback, the customer can actually upload tweaks and changes from there. And then say the customer is not getting back to Mold Masters in time, there's actually reminder notifications that go out to make sure that things are approved. And then at the end of the day, when everybody's in agreement, that approval completion updates SAP as well. So Peter mentioned we would talk a bit about a client, where they've got a system of record that isn't actually Microsoft 365, it's SAP. Having Microsoft 365, which is really your working area, having it being able to go and update that system of record is really important here. So you're not working in two different areas. And at the end of the day, having the ability for a simple spot for users to upload documents to approve documents. I mean, this has become integral to the way that Mold Masters operates as a business. And we're actually working with them right now to translate the portal into 3 additional languages. And for some time, they've been focused on North America, and they're actually going global, basically having this portal as a really important tool in their process as far as becoming aligned on mold designs. So that was just one sample there that we wanted to talk to. We saw there were lots of parallels with. The next client is Keystone Technologies. So Keystone Technologies is a lighting manufacturer that sells their products through distributors and wholesalers. A big thing for them is the way that they sell their products in general is they need to get in front of sales individuals that work at those distributors and wholesalers, and they have a whole bunch of different organizations that they sell through. They don't actually sell in a lot of cases direct to customers. So, having an LMS, an onboarding tool, a training tool that actually got the salespeople excited and would encourage them to put Keystone's product in front of their customers is a really integral part of their delivery model. And at the end of the day, they were all in on Microsoft 365. And needed an LMS to support that. And the key thing with their use of the LMS is all of the individuals at these distributors and wholesalers, they're external to Keystone. They're not employees. So how do you provide a really easy way for them to train and onboard those people to bring them up to speed and also make them aware of new product launches? And a big thing there is typically that LMS administrator is not an IT driven role. So empowering that LMS admin to have the permissions that they need to create and manage, these external accounts, but don't have them doing that over an Azure Active Directory, which is it's an overly technical interface and is quite complex. And for the most case, IT wants to keep those folks out of there. So the solution here was really leveraging our out of the box EUM to provide a simple way to have that LMS admin be able to manage guest accounts, manage groups. Under the hood, it's all Azure AD, Microsoft-based security, but it's all done through the permissions of our app. And at the end of the day, not assigning that LMS admin higher IT privileges or even changing any sort of business processes. What we deployed there fit really nicely into their existing model. And at the end of the day, really simplifies the complexity, not only for the LMS admin, but also for these sales individuals. Like if you picture yourself taking training to get up to speed on a new product, if that's a painful, complex experience just to gain access to the training material, people are going to drop off. And that's so crucial for Keystone to not have happen. The last case study that I was going to talk through a bit was the Central East Clinical Information Systems client, so CSIS. It's really a partnership between hospitals and clinics, and they provide a wide range of support to healthcare providers. So they needed a way to provide training to users at each one of the hospitals in the network. And this could be any employee within a hospital. So, you can very quickly imagine that there's well over 20,000 potential external users that might be interested in this training. And the big thing there is to do that with SharePoint Online out of the box. It didn't support an easy way to create a self-service registration and allow this to be, like to have administrators manually provisioning these accounts is painful. So they ultimately came to us with a need to say, can you build us a simplified self-registration that recognizes email domains from this group of hospitals and just go through, automatically approve the user, assign them to the particular trainings and groups within SharePoint Online, send out the branded welcome email. Dinesh would have showed that in his demo, really tailor that whole experience from start to finish, and in a way leave us hands off. We're gonna trust that each of these hospitals are Microsoft 365 licensed themselves. So have those users single sign on with their own organizational credentials. We're not on the hook for password management, and at the end of the day, give them simple access to what they need. To what they need as a user. So really reducing that administrative burden, from a staff perspective, and then automating that collaboration and the training processes. At the end of the day, that really increases ROI, efficiency, and user adoption, as well as reduces security risks, and then spinning up some sort of shadow IT. And the big thing that I would want to highlight with CSIS is we actually had conversations with them. I think it was the first week of November, and they had, from a funding model perspective, they had some really tight guidelines as to when they needed to get this portal up. And from initial conversation through to the portal actually going live and had users start self-registering was around a 3-week turnaround, which was a really powerful thing to come in and say, we've got a tool that in little to no time we can custom brand it to your organization. It's white labeled to yourselves, but under the hood, we're built leveraging all that Microsoft 365 technology. So just to wrap up, I had some questions that, for the folks on the call, just some questions to ask yourself. And in general, to start, how easy or difficult is it to collaborate within your organization? So whether you've got 7 employees or you're quite a large organization with defined departments, how easy is it to work? Do you like, is there easy information sharing back and forth? And a big thing too, is there a consistent way for sharing? Do some departments live on a file share where other departments are on Box or Dropbox, and some use SharePoint? Just think about that. Is there a consistent way to share, or does the majority of that live within email still? I know for us as an organization with 25 employees, we haven't sent an internal email in actually years to gain any sort of insight. All of our work happens over in Teams. But just think about that for your own organization. How easy is it to collaborate with your colleagues? And then extending that external, how easy of an organization are you to work with? Like, for instance, if I was a customer to you, how many external portals do I need to go to get access to what I need? Do I need to maintain one set of credentials and those are my own? Or do I have like 4 different logins to gain access to your services? That's an important thing, not just from a user experience perspective, but also from a security perspective. Allowing those users to leverage their own credentials is a big part of that. And then on top of that, how many tools do you use on a daily basis that overlap with Microsoft 365? So probably you've seen through this presentation, but shadow IT has been very prevalent. You've got, different tools that they have functionalities that overlap. From a document sharing perspective, would that go through email? Would it go through, some sort of SaaS product outside Microsoft 365, or would you do that through a sharing link through SharePoint? And then to extend on that, think of all the different sorts of collaborations that are happening externally with your organization. How would you classify the information that is being shared externally? Is it PII, PHI? And that leads into my 4th and final question, which is the security around that. Do you feel that your organization in general, is secure from an external sharing perspective? I know given the nature of our product, we get to work with lots of different types of organizations. Some that are not open to external sharing, but there's heavy use of shadow IT, and there's a sudden recognition that, okay, we've got to rein this in and get this all at least sharing through Azure AD, and other organizations that are quite open. So just think about that from a purely security perspective, and from a discussion perspective. If you want to have more of a tailored discussion where we can walk through, we're actually super transparent as an organization and how we work in Microsoft 365. Peter showed how we use our own tooling. Love to spend time with you, understand more about your business, and probe a bit deeper into these sorts of questions to see if there's an opportunity to simplify the way that you're using Microsoft 365. And then lastly, I think for the folks that are still on the call, open up now if you have thoughts or questions. Did you enjoy the webinar content that we presented? We do have a link here to an article that we did publish up late June around how we're making Microsoft simple. Like Peter said, Microsoft as a whole is a big thing to tackle. So it's we're not tackling the whole thing. We're very focused on this collaboration and extending external use case. But would love to hear any questions or thoughts you might have.
And thanks, Logan. I know we're a little bit over, but we have had a good number of people stay with us, and we're certainly available if anybody has any questions or even comments if there's something you saw that caught your eye. But we also recognize that we're not the only part of your calendar today, so there's things you need to move to for sure. But anybody with any questions, we'd love to hear them. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Again, we will be sending out recordings of the webinar. And Peter, you might want to close.
Sure. Just want to say thanks for everybody taking the time to join us today, and love to continue the conversation about how we make Microsoft simple. Thanks.